Wow, is that the infamous Ben? Hi, Ben. How are you? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our afternoon part of the Institute. The day is flying by. I don't know if it's flying by for everyone else, but we are happy to come. This is our last session of the day in terms of breakout, but reminder that there is the general session at 2:30 with the new director of MACAE, Latoya Newson. We'll be doing a fireside interview with her. So please join us for that and look for that on your program agenda. A couple of other housekeeping things is that we will be sending out the sketch validation form. We just need one. So we'll be sending it out probably this afternoon, but reminder that if you're participating tomorrow, you might just want to wait for tomorrow to submit that. Jamie is a great presenter and will be very engaging, but certainly we would encourage you to be on camera if you can. Just to give her a little kudos that she's not just talking into thin air. That's one of the downsides of the virtual, is that sometimes as a presenter, you feel all alone on an island. But we also respect and understand that people are doing multiple things at multiple times. So thank you for that. And I think that is it, but let me introduce, this is my friend and colleague, Jamie Trujillo. And I met Jamie through wonderful COAB land. And she'll probably tell a little bit about her story, but she is now the executive director of the New Mexico Adult Education Association, MACAE. And she was previously on the board at the local level working. She's been in adult education since 2005. She started as a part-time tutor at a women's correctional facility and has held a number of different positions, including program director at the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center, and has worked there since 2008. So she has just recently transitioned to her new director of the New Mexico Adult Education Association as of March 1st. So she's now an old pro, as we say in adult education, 2 months in, and she knows everything. So she's just wonderful. She's presented at a number of conferences, and her and I sit together at a new group, really as a leadership group at COAB around best practices in adult education for our association. So I want to thank Jamie for taking the time and share her wonderful resources with you all. So take it away, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was such a wonderful and warm introduction. And, I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all and just to share something that my local program has been doing. So thank you so much for attending. And I hope that you're able to get a little bit out of this. You can see that I have a QR code on this screen. So if you haven't already, if you can just scan it, don't worry if you don't get to it immediately. We're going to be coming back to it, but it really is just one question. And it gives you the opportunity to put in your email if you would like a copy of these slides. So this is a way for me to be able to send these slides to you if you are interested. But that's totally optional. So yes, if you could just scan that QR code, it'll take you to a Google form. And like Patrick said, I've been working for the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center since 2008 and will be transitioning completely out of that role next month. But what I'm talking about today is wearing that program director hat and talking about the volunteer training that was created by the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center. So I'm going to go to the next screen, but hopefully you had a chance to scan that QR code. So again, we're talking about an asynchronous volunteer tutor training that was developed a couple of years ago. And normally this presentation is done by both myself and my colleague, Nadia Cater, but she is in Mexico enjoying a wonderful beach right now. So I am flying solo today, but just know that she really is the primary creator, designer, and facilitator of this training. So I'm going to be talking a lot about her role as I talk about this training. So let's go back to that Google form really quickly. So the question that I had for you all is, what is currently being done in your program with regard to volunteer onboarding and training? So do you have an established onboarding and training that you're currently using? Are you in the process of creating a training? Or have you not created anything and you're just looking for ideas? So let's take a look. I'm going to bring up really quickly my poll. Hopefully, can you see that? I switched my tab. So can you see my results here? Perfect. So it looks like the vast majority of you don't have anything yet. Whoop. Did somebody unmute? Did you have a question?
How are you?
Oh, maybe somebody unmuted by accident. Okay. So yeah, it looks like the vast majority of you do not have any onboarding or training and you're looking for ideas. And then one of you is in the process of creating. So this is great. Hopefully you can really, find a lot of fodder for your volunteer training. And just so you know, I'm going to be taking you through a Google Classroom that I am going to share with you when this is done. So you will have full access to copy and use this classroom, this Google Classroom, as much as you choose to do so. So just to give you a quick idea of what we're going to be talking about, first, we're going to be talking about the design. What was the process of thinking about this training, all the way through the development and the implementation, the progress that we've seen so far. And please keep in mind, we are a small nonprofit, so the hard numbers are not huge, but for us, they really are. We'll talk about the classroom itself. I'll take you on a walkthrough through the classroom, and then some future directions that we have. And I'll give you an opportunity, if we have time, to try it out. If not, at the very least, I will give you access to the classroom. And please, if you have any questions as we go along, then please feel free to put it in the chat. I did see that somebody put their correct email in the chat, so I will make sure to have that in there. Thank you very much. But if you have any questions, Pat can definitely stop me, and I can answer those questions as we go along. So first, I want to talk about just the design stage. So, I, as many of you do, was wearing a lot of hats throughout my tenure with the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center. And one of those hats was to recruit and onboard volunteers. And I was also teaching 2 classes. I was also already in the program director position. So I was doing a lot of administration. And so with all that, really, the tutors, the volunteer tutors, did not have much onboarding at all. It amounted to a quick email introduction, then about a 30-minute meeting or phone conversation, and we would talk about our program, what their experiences were with tutoring, and then we would get them started with students, and they could either work one-on-one with students or help out in the classroom. And sometimes the volunteers worked out very well, and sometimes they really didn't. And I'm not sure if you've ever had those experiences with volunteers. It's really tough when they're volunteering their time, when you have to tell them it's not a good fit. That's really hard. And because they didn't really have much of a training opportunity, it was kind of a 50-50 chance that we would get either a really good or a really poor volunteer. I did have a 3-hour training that I did about once a quarter. And so I would try to get as many volunteers to attend that training as possible. But if they couldn't make it, they couldn't make it. And there were plenty of volunteers who just never made it to that training. And so what happened eventually was that we got a tutor who had a lot of experience teaching low-level learners and English learners. And we thought, this is really wonderful. He already comes to us with much experience. And we paired him with a student who was in need of that specific kind of support. And he came to Nadia in particular because she was the student's teacher and said, what curriculum am I supposed to use? What resources am I supposed to use? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And she did her very best to give him the resources and the materials that he could use with the student. But eventually he said, I feel like I was not trained for this. I don't know what I'm doing and I can't. And that really was a shock for us and really a kickstart to creating this training. And at the time, like I mentioned, Nadia was a teacher, and she comes with a really strong instructional design background. And she said, I would really like to work with you on developing this training. And so naturally, I said, yes, absolutely, we want to do this. And so over the course of a few months, it was probably about 3 months, we designed this training, decided it was going to be in Google Classroom. And she really just leaned on me as the subject matter expert and the historian, if you will, when it comes to our program. She had been with our program for about a year at that point. So she was still relatively new to our program. And so I was really giving her that background as to, what we needed, what our tutors needed, what our students needed. And we looked at a lot of different resources. And so really quickly, I'm going to pull away from the slides, and I'm going to show you the design document really quickly, because this is something that I had never done before. And Nadia was just very thorough in how we decided really what topics were going to be covered by the training, who our audience was going to be. And then we created our learning objective for every single topic, and then how we were going to do it. It would be in Google Classroom. Is this going to be a quiz? Is this going to be a reading or a video? Are they going to have to do a comment or a writing piece? And so we developed this. You can see it's quite long, just to create all of the assignments within our Google Classroom. And then once it was complete, we did mark that off, and it's not highlighted anymore, but it was highlighted prior with who was going to do each module. And so, like I said, after about 3 months, it was completely formulated. And one thing to keep in mind is that this was not our end result. So this gave us an opportunity to really think about what do we want to put in, and then kind of pare down what we were going to have. So it was really great to be able to work on this with her, because it was a great, it was a very detailed way of developing this classroom. And I'm happy to share this as well if you are interested. So let me go back over here. So once we had our design figured out, we were going to develop the actual classroom. And it was very apparent from the beginning that we wanted it to be self-paced. None of us, we're a very small nonprofit. At the time, we had 7 employees total. No one person had the time to be able to do regular volunteer trainings that were either virtual or in person, that were all synchronous. So we wanted to make sure that we had a self-paced option for our volunteers. And we wanted to make sure that the areas that were important were covered, such as an introduction to our organization, an introduction to our students. Who are the people that we served? Adult learning principles. There's a big difference, as you know, between teaching adults and teaching children. And a lot of our volunteers were retired K-12 teachers. And so we wanted to make sure to give them the tools that they needed to be able to serve adults. And then we have been, as a state, New Mexico as a state has gotten a lot of training from the back of the room. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, with Sharon Bowman, but it's a concept that was first developed for trainers, but can easily be adapted for teachers. And the 4 C's, which if I have some time, I'll show you what those are, but it basically are the 4 key components of any lesson: connection, concepts, concrete practice, and conclusion. And so we wanted to make sure that our tutors had a basic understanding of that, among other things. So these were, I think our top topic priorities for the classroom. In addition, we have other pieces of our onboarding process. So even though that self-paced Google Classroom is the largest part of the training, which can take anywhere, what we found is it can take anywhere from 12 to 16 hours total to complete, we wanted to make sure that there was a full onboarding process. And it starts with an interest form. So on our website, we have an interest form. It's very short. We ask them for their contact information, and when we receive that interest form, we give them an Albuquerque Adult Learning Center email, we give them access to the classroom, and we give them instructions along with a tutorial video showing them how to use Google Classroom. And so once they fill out the interest form, we send out that initial email, and then it is really up to the volunteer to decide how and how long it takes for them to complete the Google Classroom. And part of this was a readout process, to be quite honest. We wanted to make sure that the volunteer was truly knowledgeable or had a realistic expectation of what we were expecting, because we do expect at least a 6-month commitment with working with students, so that our students don't have to bounce around between volunteers. So we wanted to make sure that, one, they were actually truly motivated to do this and that they had the time to do this, but also that they were very aware of what was being expected of them. And so once they complete the Google Classroom, then they have to go to it's about 2 hours. It can go up to 3 depending on the size of the group, but it's a 2 to 3 hour in-person meeting with Nadia, where she goes over the different classroom schedules. She gets them ready to do classroom observations and things like that. So they have that in-person meeting, and then they are required to do 2 classroom observations. So all of these steps have to be complete before they can be, quote unquote, set free to work with our students, whether they're working one-on-one or they're working as a classroom assistant. So I'll show you in a second, but we actually have had a lot of really great success with this. And overall, I think that this onboarding process has been working very well for us. I'm going to check the chat really quickly. Okay, there's no other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and go on. So I wanted to really share these numbers with you because, like I said, we're a small organization. We serve about 250 students a year. And so, our goal was to have 5 really well-trained volunteers by the end of last year, and we actually did meet that. So this is since January of 2022, so it's been a little over a year that we've had these results. But you can see with this pie chart that 13 showed interest, and we sent the initial email, but then they never started the training. Another 13 have started the Google Classroom training and either never finished or are still in the process. Most of them have not finished. I think we only have 1 that's still in the process. 6 did finish the process completely and started volunteering. And actually it was 9. I take that back. 9 actually finished everything and started tutoring, but 3 of them were hired as staff. That's something that I am particularly excited about because we try very hard whenever we have a position open. If we have a tutor that's been with us for quite a while and has shown a lot of dedication and skill, then we will try our very best to hire them. So we do have 1 that was hired as a part-time instructor and 2 that were hired as instructional assistants for our ESL program. So that really, in my opinion, shows how well the weed out has worked because the ones who are volunteering now have been volunteering since they finished. We don't have any that stopped volunteering after doing this training. And this has been, like I said, since January of 2021. So really the caliber of our volunteers has increased tremendously because they were able to show right from the get-go that motivation and persistence to finish the training, finish the onboarding process, and work with students. So I want to just really quickly see if anybody has any questions before I show you the actual classroom. Please feel free to unmute or put your question in the chat if you have any.
I have a question, Jamie. Did you,
Yes.
when you were going through this initial process, did you already have some volunteers identified that maybe had previously been connected with the program or work with the program and then like kind of almost retrain them? Or was it really just kind of walk off the street, somebody wants to volunteer and we have to, you know what I mean? Because I think some of our providers may be looking for implementing something like this with some of their current volunteers, right? Getting them more rigor and a little bit, kind of like tutor tune-up kind of a thing, but also looking at some volunteers that, could potentially enter in the program down the road. So what was kind of that pool, I guess?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question because we did have 3 volunteers that had been volunteering with us for years already and were great volunteers, but we wanted to give them the opportunity to also complete the training. Now, what we did for those volunteers is we made it optional for them. We gave them access to the classroom and we said, you don't have to do all of the modules if you don't want to. You can just kind of pick and choose. And we did have 2 of the 3 that went in and did a few of those. But we did not make it mandatory. So, if they had already been working with us, we weren't going to try to, force them to go through the entire onboarding process. And we definitely didn't force them to do any of the observations and things like that. That was definitely for the older or the brand new volunteers. We had been talking about doing kind of like a continuing ed classroom, quote unquote, for our current volunteers. And that's still something we're exploring as things change, as things get updated. We want to be able to offer that as well. So thank you for that question. All right, so let's take a look at the classroom. Oh, there we go. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Google Classroom, but it's a free option, which of course is why we chose it, because we are a nonprofit. We do have G Suite for nonprofits. And so we were able to utilize all of the G Suite tools for this. And I'm going to actually take you to the stream here, because this we found ended up being kind of tricky, because when you log on, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but when you log on as a student to Google Classroom, it takes you to the stream first. Even if you log on as an instructor, it takes you to the stream first. And what we were finding was that students or volunteers were doing the assignments in the order of the stream. And we were wondering why they kept doing things out of order. And that's why it was. So we stopped giving them access to the stream except for announcements. So only announcements are visible in the stream to the students. But if we go to the classwork, you'll notice that there are 7 modules, as well as a resource here at the top. Now, I want to go into more detail about this volunteer tutor handbook here in a little bit, but Nadia made this as something that the volunteers could go back to as a reference. It's a PDF that really summarizes all of these different modules for the volunteers. And so they could download it and they could reference it without having to redo any of the assignments. So I'll be able to show that to you all here in a minute. But we're just going to kind of run through these different modules really quickly. So the first is an introduction to our organization. And anytime a student goes in, they just click on the assignment and then they view the instructions. And so we make it very clear. We give a little introductory sentence. Then we tell them the objective, the purpose of the assignment, so they always know why we're giving them a particular assignment. And then we have step-by-step instructions. Usually there's a reading piece or a video, and then there's either a comment or something that they have to write inside of a Google Doc that they have to submit, something like that. Usually it's a comment. And so in this case, we give them an introduction to the whole tutor training process. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Canva, but I swear Nadia is just she's a Canva pro. She's so good with Canva. And so she was able to make this roadmap. What are the steps so that they know right from the get-go what is expected of them in the whole onboarding process. And then she created a letter. So this is actually from her that gives the tutor an introduction to who we are. This used to be a Google Slides. We actually had a rather long Google Slides presentation that she pared down into a letter that made it a lot easier to read. And then we had, same thing. This was also part of the Google Slides that we had for them, but just an introduction to the students, the class schedule, all the different locations that we have, as well as a breakdown of what each teacher does, what days they cover what subjects, the technology and curriculum they use, if they give homework, and what tutor help they're specifically looking for. And the reason why we did this is so that they could self-select who they were going to observe and possibly who they were going to help as a volunteer tutor based on their schedules, based on their availability, what they were interested in tutoring, and whether they were going to have to use any kind of technology, because we do have a distance education class as well. And so this really went into detail about all of those things. And then at the very end, you look here. Okay, so this last part right here, create a class comment. And so we ask them to answer those 3 questions in the class comment. So there's always an action item associated with each assignment. So we talk about our organization, And then a little bit of tutoring 101, they have to do a self-assessment, how to succeed in tutoring, how to be a well-rounded tutor. We talk about growth mindset. We talk about grit and persistence. We talk about motivation, like I said, growth mindset already, and then the 4 C's. I already mentioned that. And so I wanted to show you really quickly this one, because this is one that we found that the tutors really learned a lot from. So again, this is something that Nadia developed on her own. She talked about andragogy and the 4 C's, all the different parts of the 4 C's. And then there is a sample 4 C's lesson plan that she did on a Jamboard. So you can see it's split into 4 sections: the objective, and the connection, the concepts, the concrete practice, and the conclusion. So we ask the tutors to come up with a very simple 4 C's lesson plan that they can share, just to get them into that habit of using that kind of a lesson template. Then we go on to talk about GED and HiSET. A lot of our tutors are not familiar with either test. I'm not sure about Michigan, but in New Mexico, we have both options. So okay, yeah, you guys have that too. So we want to make sure that they know the difference between the 2 tests, and we give them an opportunity to take a practice test. We ask them to choose one of the tests and take one of them. And I think this one, I'm sorry, this is not the official GED practice test. They're free sample test questions that we were able to find, but then these are the some official HiSET practice tests. So they just have to take one of them and see how they do, and see if they're surprised by the results there. And then we talk about 21st century technology needs, particularly with the type of technology that our students use in the classroom. So we are very heavy on G Suite. So we want to make sure that they are knowledgeable about how to use G Suite, how to use Google Classroom. And then we also use Khan Academy as a supplemental tool. So we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to try out Khan Academy if they haven't already. And we found that a lot of our tutors actually really like Khan Academy and continue using it as they work with students, or even in their own personal growth. We did have one tutor that told us that he just wanted to continue using Khan Academy to build up his skills so he could help better tutor our students. And then we also talk about Google Meet, because that's our primary asynchronous virtual meeting tool. So we use that. And then we also use TABE as our NRS approved assessment. So we want to make sure that they understand how to read a TABE score report. We don't certify them to proctor the TABE. They do not have to do that, but we want to make sure that they can read that in case a student comes to them with their TABE score report, so that they can use that information to gauge what the student needs to work on. And then finally, we have our policies and guidelines. So this is more, of course, administrative, the code of ethics, how to communicate with teachers, because a lot of our volunteers are not simply working one-on-one with students. They're helping out in the classroom, even if they're also working one-on-one with students. Most of them are also 1 day a week, 2 days a week, going to a particular class and helping out with the teacher. So, how do you communicate with the teachers? We do have them do a FERPA training. And then we also ask them, if they're working one-on-one with students, of course, to report student hours. And then we ask them to report their volunteer hours. So this is just how to do those things. And finally, at the very end, and there's a reason for this, we have them fill out our volunteer application and legal agreement. So we used to do this right up front. We used to have them fill that out, and then we would file the paperwork. But if they're not going to finish the entire training, we didn't want to have them, do all that extra work for us. And so we just put that at the very end. If after they've completed the training, they're still interested, they still want to do it, then we have them fill those out. Those are both in Google form. And so, in Google Forms. And so they fill out the Google form and we file that away. So this is the full Google Classroom that they have to complete. And like I said, it takes anywhere from 12 to 16 hours to complete. And we've had some tutors finish this in 2 weeks or less. We've had some take a couple of months, but it really is up to them. How much time do they have to dedicate to this? How quickly do they want to get started? So we give them really that option. And one thing that Nadia does, because she, like I said, is the one who looks through all these assignments and gives feedback on all the assignments. She also has a very simple Google Sheet where she keeps track of who has completed what assignment. So she knows who is getting close to finishing, because she offers that in-person meeting once a month. So she knows who specifically to reach out to so that they know that there's a meeting coming up. And I'm sure you guys have noticed there's nothing turned in. If I were to go to grades, nobody's turned in anything. And the reason for that is because this is just a copy of our classroom. This is not the actual classroom, just for the protection of our tutors. And so we've been using this at various trainings, the COAB conference, a regional conference where we presented and things like that. This is just a shell. So there's nothing that is going to disappear when you go into this or anything like that, or change. We just wanted to make sure that this was available for training purposes. So, but yeah, normally she will go in and she will comment on their class comments. She will provide feedback on all of their assignments and things like that. So that is ongoing and regular. So are there any questions about the actual classroom before I go back to the Google slides? All right. So moving forward, like I said, we're very happy with the way that this Google Classroom has turned out and the way that the onboarding has been going. And so we want to think of different ways that this can be expanded in the next few years. And one way is that we want to expand the specificity of the training. So right now, the classroom really only focuses on high school equivalency and adult basic ed topics. But we also have a basic literacy group where we focus on NRS levels 1 and 2, and we also have an ESL group. Now, in the 15 years that I've worked for Albuquerque Adult Learning Center, this fiscal year, is the first year that we've ever offered ESL classes. So at the time that this was created, at the time that we created this classroom, we didn't have an ESL cohort. So now that we do, we want to be able to provide modules that are specific to volunteers who want to work with our ESL students. Like I mentioned, we have those 2 that are now instructional assistants, and they came to us, and in fact, even our part-time teacher, the one we ended up hiring as a part-time high school equivalency instructor, they came to us specifically saying that they wanted some exposure working with students who were English language learners, because they wanted to expand their own experience and their own skill set with ESL. So we've gotten a lot of interest in that area. And so we want to be able to include more, or even have a secondary classroom that is specific to ESL, although I imagine it's going to end up being a topic of its own. So we're going to have that. Like I mentioned, we want to expand to have foundations level. We don't call it basic literacy, we call it foundations, just because of the stigma that students have with the word literacy. So we want to have a foundations level tutoring. We also want to have an advanced level tutoring. We have one teacher who is just very adept at working with students on test prep, test taking strategies, and getting them over that hump so that they can go and take the test and graduate. And so one thing that Nadia had always brought up to our executive director, who really loves this idea, is this idea of forming volunteer-led learning circles. So instead of just being one-on-one or having the volunteer working in the classroom, they would work with a small group of students, probably about 5 students or less, on a particular subject area, for example, math, and it would be at a faster pace than a large scale classroom, where they would just, get that extra push to be able to get done and go take the test. And so we're still working on that. That's still something that is a possibility in the future. And other small group tutoring. It doesn't have to be the higher level. It could be any level, but having those small group learning circles is something that we want to be able to train the volunteers to do. And this would allow us as a small nonprofit to expand our reach and serve more students without having to try to find funding to do so. If we're working with volunteers, then we're able to just serve more students with the same amount of funds. And if any of you work for a nonprofit, you know how that is. It's just very difficult to find the funding. The interest is there. We always have sites that want to have our services there, that want to have classes there, and we can hire and we can train a teacher and we can provide the materials, but having the funding to pay for the teacher, to pay for those materials is sometimes very difficult, and the partner that's interested in having on-site classes doesn't always have that. So if we were to be able to provide a trained volunteer for those sites, then we would be able to expand that. And so it's kind of still in its infancy for that area, but we definitely want to be able to expand what we offer in that way. And there are a few things that we've learned. Like I said, overall, it's been a very positive experience, even given that first bullet there. You are going to lose potential volunteers because of the format, because of the time. That is just something that happens. We have lost people that we thought would be wonderful volunteers, but we do require this across the board. Some volunteers just don't like that. Some of them are resistant to technology, and just don't have the time, and so they just self-select to not finish. And we lost 13 doing it that way. So it's there's that gamble that you have, but again, when you think about the caliber of the ones who do finish, in my opinion, it is worth that sacrifice, especially because we had two volunteers in particular one in particular who seemed very excited. I did meet her in person, very wonderful personality, but as she was going through the training, found that was just not for her. And it was very apparent as she was going through the assignments, how little she was willing to work with that population. And it wasn't anything bad because she never worked with a student. And so there was never that opportunity to cause harm. And that is the biggest fear, is having a volunteer who actually causes harm to a student. And we were able to stave that off twice already because of this process. We did have another volunteer who sent me a rather long and condescending email asking me why he was having to do this. He didn't understand why he had to do this. He already has all of this knowledge and expertise as a retired engineer. And if I just give him students, he'll give me results. Why can't I just do what I do best? And I respectfully responded that this was something that we required of everyone, and there was a reason for it. We wanted to make sure that everybody had the same base level of knowledge, and we needed to make sure that the motivation and persistence was there, and that he was absolutely welcome to find a different program if it didn't work for him. And we never heard from him again. So there was definitely that opportunity to weed out potential harmful volunteers. Another thing that we learned are people are not as well versed in G Suite as we originally thought, especially post-COVID. I think now the assumption is that people have been online for so long that they were almost forced to increase their digital literacy, and that wasn't always the case. And so we, of course, have a video, like I mentioned in my initial email that I send out. I send a link to a video on how to access Google Classroom, how to access the assignments, how to turn in assignments. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes they have to be given more support. And so we do have to give a little bit more support just in the realm of G Suite than we originally thought. And we're happy to do that. It's just, something we were not, that we were surprised by. And it is important to keep instructors and staff on board. This is especially important when you think about the 2 classroom observations that the volunteers have to do. And the reason I bring this up is because when a tutor has finished their in-person meeting with Nadia, they are able to choose which 2 sites they want to observe. It could be the same site, it could be 2 different sites. And then Nadia will send an email to the teachers as well as the volunteer, informing them that we have a volunteer that finished the training. They're interested in observing with you. And it is up to the teacher to then respond and say, great, here's my class schedule. Let me know when you want to come, which day you want to come, and they work from there. And if the teacher does not respond, that can be very disheartening for the volunteer. And so it's very important that the instructors are responsive and that they are open to having volunteers in the classroom. And then, of course, structure is key to success. We have had a very clear structure on the steps of our onboarding process. We don't deviate from that. We require that of everyone. And we have found that that has just been very successful in what we've been doing over the past, year and a quarter. So those are just a few of the lessons that we've learned as we've gone through this process. So now I want to give everybody an opportunity to actually go into the classroom. So if you want to go to classroom.google.com, and I'll put that link in the chat. Let's see here. Classroom.google.com, and put in this join code, and I'll put in the join code in the chat as well, so you can just copy it. ZM5XX4K. If you want to just copy that code, and then you can go to the classroom. And this will help you join as a student. So if you joined a little bit late and you weren't able to put your email into the Google form that I had, please feel free to put your email in the chat, and I can add you as a teacher. I will also be able to add you as a teacher based on the Google form. But adding you as a teacher will give you the opportunity to make a copy. But for right now, I want you to go in as a student and check it out. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I will send you, and Joan, thank you so much. I'll make sure to send you all invites as instructors. But yes, right now, go ahead and join as a student and check it out. See what it looks like as a student. Try out an assignment. Ask me questions as you go along. I usually have some music prepped. I don't have some music prepped right now.
Can I ask, Jamie, as folks are looking at this, and I just think it's awesome that you, A, took the time to call all these resources, and B, that you're willing to share them with us. Thank you. How long did it take you to build this?
Took about 3 months.
I was gonna say months, not days.
Yeah. Yes, definitely months. It was about October to January that we developed this, because it launched in mid-January of 2022. So in 2021, like I said, about October is when we started doing this. And one thing I will mention, as you guys are, going through this and looking at the assignments, I had already mentioned that, we hired Nadia as a teacher, and the instructional design experience, she already came with that. And so this was really the catalyst that moved her from being an instructor to being our instructional designer and coordinator. That position did not exist prior to her. We created that position just for her, and her focus, aside from the volunteer tutor training and support, which again, that's a big part of her job that she regularly keeps up with. She also is in charge of professional development for the staff. So she will make sure that the staff is aware of different webinars and other trainings that are available. She was instrumental in developing our professional development policy that our staff have to adhere to. We require 12 hours a year of professional development for each staff member, plus attendance at one conference. And she keeps track of all that. She keeps track of how many hours of professional development each instructor does. She also does classroom observations, and we developed together. We developed an classroom observation sheet. So it's a rubric that she goes by. It's an Excel spreadsheet, or a Google sheet actually, that she will fill out. And it's very objective. And so I just feel very grateful that she came to our program with that kind of expertise, because in New Mexico in particular, we don't have a lot of professionals who have instructional design experience. And so having that, and now she's doing it on a state level for NMEA, for the New Mexico Adult Education Association. She is a coordinator for our Propel Learning System. And the Propel Learning System is our formal statewide professional development entity that is overseen by NMEA. NMEA oversees all that professional development. And so she, as a coordinator, does a lot of development of the synchronous and asynchronous professional development offerings for the state. And I think that it really got started because that one volunteer said, I don't feel trained well enough and I need to be better trained and I can't do this anymore. And unfortunately, we did reach out to that volunteer after we developed this training and he never responded. I was really sad about that. But you know, it's just one of those things that caused this humongous ripple effect that I think was very positive. So thank you all for all those emails. Yes.
I was gonna just ask the crowd if they had taken a chance to look, if there were any takeaways or thoughts that people had on your behalf.
I'm happy to hear any kind of feedback you all have. And if you all are in the classroom, yeah, if you have anything that you would like to share, are there any best practices that you have as instructors working with volunteers, or maybe as administrative staff working with volunteers? If you have any best practices, I love hearing about them because, of course, this isn't a perfect system. It can always be improved upon. So, Patrick, is there a way for me to get this chat? For you to send me the chat so that I can make sure that I get everyone's email? Perfect.
Yeah, let me make a note and I'll send it to you.
Perfect, perfect. So yes, put your email in the chat if you want to be added as a teacher. And if you've put your email in the Google form already, I will also send you that. I can send you all the slides as well. So if you put your email in the chat, I will also send you these slides so that you have them for your reference. But yeah, once you are added as an instructor, feel free to make a copy. A lot of our modules, of course, are program specific. We have things that we've developed for our own program, but it might give you ideas of what you want to do with your program. Even if you use just one module, then, that was helpful. So I know we're ahead of schedule, so I don't think anybody complains about that, but we still have plenty of time for any questions or comments if you have any.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? I know that.
Thank you.
I think it's awesome too, Kimberly. It's like, oh my gosh, Jamie, you want to just come and design all of our stuff and have it be so nice and organized and
See, that's Nadia. That's not me. I really cannot take credit for this design. It was, a lot of it was supported by me. But Nadia really did, develop a ton of this. And actually, while we're looking at, I wanted to show you guys the volunteer tutor handbook for a second, because this was also made on Canva. But you can see this is something that the tutors have to refer back to after they've completed the training. And the table of contents is clickable, so they can go back and forth between any area just by clicking on it. But we do give our contact information, as well as Nadia's role, because she is their primary support, our class schedule. And what's great about this is that it's a living thing. So if there's a change made to it, we don't have to resend it out. It's a link. So they have the most updated information at all times. And then we have our class sites, the tutor role and responsibilities, the code of ethics, facts about our students. These are our students in particular, so these are our student demographics, our organization, the different programs we have, so high school equivalency and foundations. We do need to add ESL in here. We haven't done that quite yet. Adults versus child learners, principles of andragogy, the 4 C's, as I've mentioned many times already, a sample lesson plan, some tutoring tips, strategies for safety, especially if they're working one-on-one with students. We did have a tutor that was having students meet him in his house. We had to put a stop to that for obvious reasons, but it was not anything, it was very innocent. He just thought it was most convenient for that. And so we had to make sure that they knew that they couldn't do that. And then some resources. So, I think that this is just a fabulous resource for our tutors once they've completed the training so that they can just come back to it. So they can download it as a PDF or keep it online, however they want to do that. So if once I add you as an instructor, you will also have access to this, so you can, print it out or download it and modify it for your program. And there's our email addresses, just in case you think of any questions after the fact. Like I mentioned, Nadia really developed the vast majority of this. So when it comes to, really detailed questions about the onboarding process itself or anything that she's gone through working directly with volunteers, you can definitely reach out to her and ask her about all that. So those are our contact information.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamie. Like I said, I appreciate your time. And when I was seeing this at COAB, I was like, okay, this is something that, I know our teams, our programs could utilize and take back and adapt and modify. And I think, it's all about not reinventing the wheel, recreating the wheel. Really.
Absolutely. I firmly believe in that. If there's anything that can be borrowed, then I highly, encourage that. In fact, some of these pieces were borrowed. We borrowed them from another literacy program. And they had, the way they structured it was a website. They had a website with all of these modules that their tutors had to go through. So we took what we thought we could use from them. So, not all of this is original either. So it's important to share these kind of resources. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Are there any other last minute questions or comments for Jamie?
I was waiting for the announcement to be done on my end. We just had an announcement about like yearbooks and stuff like that. It's the end of the year. This looks like a really, really thought out, really great approach to volunteers. And I am hesitant to say this, but I will, because I like making fun of myself. We need to do a lot more. And so I'm very thankful for all this information.
Thank you. I'm very glad. Yeah, this came about because we needed to do a lot more. And we got to a point where we had someone who came to us with the experience and time to do it. So yeah, I totally understand. I was in that position 2 years ago.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, again for your time. Thank you,
Yes.
everybody. We're leaving you a little bit early, but that is okay because we all have a million things to do, right? So
Right.
take the
Or take a
time.
body break.
Exactly. Take a little time for yourself, however that is. So, we won't tell anyone that we're ending a little 15 minutes early. So you're still on the clock. So
Thank you all very much.
thank you so much, Jamie. And don't forget, if you are able to, at 2:30 to join us for the session with Director Latoya Newson, who's the new director of OCTE, the Office of Career and Technical Adult Education. Should be a good conversation with her. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you again, Jamie, for all that you've done for us.
Yes, thank you all.